I gave my mom my house, but Jasper, my stepdad, banished me to the garage. I'm Lila, erased from my own home, my couch now a dog's bed. One call flipped everything. Where are you listening from? What would you do if your mother chose silence over you? The wind carried that brittle chill only Vermont autumns could conjure, sharp, quiet, and full of memory. I pulled into the driveway, slower than I meant to. The house looked almost the same from the street, but the closer I got, the more I felt it. Something had changed. The porch planter I once filled with marigolds had been replaced with gravel. The welcome mat I picked out with my mom 2 Christmases ago, gone. The door was freshly painted a dull green, and somehow that hurt more than I'd expected. I cut the engine and sat for a second, my fingers still curled around the steering wheel. I had signed this house over to my mother 4 years ago. I did it with open hands and an open heart, thinking I was giving her stability after she remarried. It was the right thing to do. I had told myself I didn't need a house then. I needed space, career, distance, and she needed a place to land after years of struggle. I opened the car door and stepped out, my boots crunching lightly on the driveway gravel. The air was dry, the sky overcast, as if even the sun couldn't quite bear to shine that day. I rang the bell. A pause, then the door creaked open. Jasper stood there, no smile, just a flat, "You're early." That was it. I waited for the rest, some acknowledgement, a polite welcome, a glance behind him to check if my mother had heard the bell. Nothing. "I thought I'd come a little ahead of the family dinner," I said, pulling my suitcase up the step. "Figured I'd settle in, help out." He looked past me like I'd brought in a breeze he didn't like. "We set something up for you out back." Out back? My chest tightened, but I said nothing, just followed him silently through the side gate, wheeling my suitcase over uneven stone. The garage door was already open. Inside sat a cot, thin blanket, no heater. A single extension cord snaked from the wall to a small lamp. The air smelled like gasoline and old paint. "You know," he added, barely glancing at me, "the guest room's under renovation." I turned my head toward the house. Through the open blinds, I could see the door to the guest room cracked wide. The bed was made neat, not a speck of dust. "Right," I said. He walked away without another word. I stood in the center of the garage. My breath came out in soft clouds. I told myself it was just for a night, that maybe the heater had gone out, that there was some explanation. But when I stepped inside to ask for a space heater, no one looked up. My mother wasn't even in the kitchen. She didn't come out to say hello. I saw her, though, through the back window, laughing with Jasper's daughter Mira on the sunroom couch, my reading nook. The one I'd saved for, built with my own 2 hands. The one with the blue throw blanket I'd crocheted for my mom after buying the house. It was draped around Jasper like it belonged to him. I walked back to the garage, clutching my phone, numb fingers scrolling through my contacts. I stopped on her name, pressed call, voicemail. I lowered the phone, sat on the cot, stared at the cement floor. "This is temporary," I whispered. "This is still your home." I could still hear her voice from that day, but it wasn't. Not anymore. The mattress squeaked beneath me as I lay down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared up at the rafters, blinking slowly, my lips moving with a sentence I wanted to believe. "You did the right thing. You were trying to help." But the words felt hollow each time they left my mouth. The garage wasn't quiet. Not really. It creaked and groaned as the wind pushed against the aluminum door, and every so often a car passed on the street outside, headlights brushing against the crack beneath the frame. But just before dawn, what woke me wasn't wind or light. It was laughter and clinking mugs. I sat up slowly on the cot, the blanket falling from my shoulders. The chill was worse now. My toes were numb, but my ears had sharpened that voice I knew too well. Jasper. "And she's still here." Thought she had more pride than that. The words floated easily through the thin walls, no effort to whisper. I didn't move at first. I just sat there, staring at the floor, letting the sentence echo. Then something compelled me forward, like my body had made the decision before my mind caught up. I padded quietly to the garage door, careful not to let it creak as I cracked it open half an inch. From that sliver of space, I had a clear view into the kitchen. Jasper stood by the island, a mug in hand. Across from him, Mira sat on a bar stool, legs crossed like she owned the place. "Give us the house," he said, shaking his head. "Doesn't mean she gets to come and go like she owns it," Mira scoffed. Did she seriously think she'd sleep inside? "This isn't a shelter." They both laughed. Jasper sipped his coffee like it was just another morning, like I wasn't 10 feet away hearing every single word. I should have walked back, closed the door, let it go. But I couldn't. I stood frozen, hands clenched, heart pounding. Not in sadness, but in something deeper, something colder. That's when I flashed back 4 years ago, standing in a small notary office uptown. I'd worn a gray blazer. I remember because I bought it just for that day. I wanted to look official. I'd smiled as I handed over the deed. Mom had hugged me, tears in her eyes. "We'll always make room for you, sweetheart," she said. Always. But here I was now, in the garage like some unwanted guest, while Mira's voice slithered back into the present. You should have seen how pathetic she looked in that garage. Honestly, she brought it on herself. I closed the door gently. My hand was shaking, but not from the cold anymore. By the time I stepped into the house, my body had gone still. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I needed to look them in the eyes, needed to see if they'd flinch. They didn't. Myra barely turned her head. Jasper glanced up once, then kept stirring his coffee. "Did you really mean all that?" I asked, voice calm. Too calm. Jasper shrugged. "You chose to hand it over. We didn't ask you. You gave it up, so now you live with the consequences." Mira leaned forward. "You thought you were doing some big, noble thing, huh? But that's not how real life works." And my mother, she stood by the sink, hands on the counter, eyes lowered. She didn't speak, didn't move. No apology, nothing. That was when the shift happened. Not a scream, not a breakdown, just a click, like something inside me locked into place. A decision, a final quiet acknowledgement. I turned without a word, walked back through the hallway, past the stopless guest room with its untouched bed and folded towels, opened the garage door, sat on the cot, phone in hand, and started dialing. I made one phone call, just one, and within minutes I heard Jasper yell from the porch. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing until I heard the sound of my own exhale fogging up the garage window. My hand trembled as I slid my phone from the pocket of my jacket and pressed the screen. The name, Thomas Willard, popped up immediately. I hadn't called him in over 18 months, but I knew he'd pick up. Thomas had been my real estate attorney since I bought this place. We'd gone to college together. He knew my history. More importantly, he knew how to read between the lines. He answered on the second ring. "Lila, I need you to pull the deed file," I said, my voice lower than I expected. "Something's not right." There was a pause. "You okay?" "No, but I'm handling it." He didn't press, just said, "Give me 20 minutes." While I waited, I sat on the cot, staring at the garage door like it might open up and swallow all the years I'd lost. This house, my house, still had pieces of me inside it. The crown molding I chose, the built-in shelves I had installed, the paint color in the kitchen my mother swore made the space feel happier. And yet, I was the one exiled to the garage like some unwelcome stray. 20 minutes later, Thomas called back. His voice was tight, clipped. "Lila, you're still listed as the legal owner. The deed transfer paperwork, your mother never filed it. It was signed but never processed. The house is still yours." I didn't answer. I slid my phone into the side pocket of my duffel just before he pushed open the garage door. He was still wearing sweatpants, a mug clutched in his hand like a weapon. "You think you're clever?" he growled. "Trying to stir things up with your legal buddies now?" I stood up calmly. I made a phone call. "Who'd you call, huh? A lawyer trying to threaten us? This your big comeback?" I tilted my head slightly, watching him fume. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the realization that something had slipped out of his control. "You've got until Wednesday to pack it up," he snapped. "You're not staying here. Not after this." I didn't respond, just smiled faintly, like someone who finally understood the rules of a game they'd been losing. He took a step forward. "This house doesn't belong to you anymore." But that's when it hit him. The calm, the silence, the way I looked at him like he wasn't even a threat anymore. He left in a huff, muttering curses under his breath. The door slammed behind him. And then it all came back. The day I signed the deed, I had flown back for the long weekend to finalize the paperwork. My mother had greeted me with a warm smile and a slice of apple pie. She told me the county office was closed that week, but she'd filed the documents as soon as they reopened. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she said. "It's just a formality. You'll always have a place here." I'd hugged her. I believed her, but she knew. She never filed anything. I sat down again on the cot, letting the truth settle like frost on my skin. Then, slowly, I reached for my phone and opened the voice memo app. "Thomas," I said quietly, "can you draft a formal letter? I want to notify the current occupants that any alterations made to the property without the legal owner's consent are a violation of state property law." Just as I pressed send, I heard Jasper's voice echoing from inside. "You told me she gave us the house, Mira. You said she signed it over." "And she did," Mira snapped. "Ask Mom." A pause. Then my mother's voice, soft, strained, like someone cornered. "She wouldn't do this. She's not that kind of daughter." "She's not. But I was. Or maybe I had to become her because they'd made sure the version they wanted no longer had a place. And that, I thought, was their mistake. But I was exactly that kind of daughter. By late morning, the air in the house had shifted. There was a tension floating just under the surface like the air before a thunderstorm. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water and saw it, sitting there on the counter. Heavy cardstock, silver trim, the kind of invitation you send when you want to show off, dinner to celebrate new beginnings. It read, "Hosted by Jasper and Voss, friends and family of the Vosses." No mention of me. Not even a formality like hosted in the home of, just Jasper's surname and my mother's initial printed like a seal over something that was never theirs. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I turned the card over, half expecting some note scribbled in her handwriting. Nothing. Just a printed RSVST and 99. Nothing. Just a printed RSVST and Orion. I set it down and walked out to the garage. I already knew what I was going to wear. That evening, as twilight spilled over the roof lines of our rural street, I stood in front of the hall mirror. No makeup, my hair tied back, wearing a simple navy sweater and jeans, no jewelry, no heels, nothing festive. Just myself. I didn't want to be mistaken for someone trying to belong. By the time I entered the dining room, the guests had already arrived. The place smelled of thyme and roasted garlic. Candles flickered against polished glasses. People I'd never met were lounging on chairs I'd bought, complimenting the warmth of the space I'd built with my own hands. I slipped into the farthest seat at the end of the table. No one stood up. No one asked where I'd been. I was invisible, but I was watching. Jasper stood, raising his glass. "We're grateful to everyone here tonight. This house has been a blessing, and we're especially thankful to our tenant." He turned his eyes toward me, like I was a distant cousin who had wandered in from the cold, who's generously allowed us to stay while we get back on our feet. Laughter, polite, detached, rehearsed. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. My mother nodded in agreement, her mouth drawn in a soft, practiced expression. No apology, no acknowledgement. The food was passed. I didn't reach for any. Midway through the meal, I slipped into the kitchen to get a glass of water. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Nora, my stepsister. She leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Why are you letting them do this?" she asked, voice low. I met her gaze. "Do what? Treat you like this? You gave them the house, didn't you?" I shook my head. "No. I loaned them a lie I thought was temporary." Her brow furrowed, the first real crack in her performative confidence. "Then why are you letting them win?" I stared at the faucet running into my glass. "Because they think I'm still playing the same game." Back in the dining room, Jasper was telling a story about his old landscaping job, like he'd built the place himself. Everyone nodded along, entertained. I walked over to the table. Slowly, deliberately, I reached for the crystal centerpiece, a 3-tier glass arrangement of white lilies and twisted vines. I had it custom made for this room 6 years ago. Lifting it from the center, I carried it down the length of the table. Some eyes followed, most didn't notice. As I passed Jasper's chair, I paused. I leaned just close enough for him to hear. "The only reason your glass hasn't shattered is because I still own this table." His grip on the wine stem stiffened, his smile faltered. And just like that, I walked into the kitchen and placed the centerpiece on the counter. My home, my rules. I didn't need applause. I didn't need confrontation. They'd made their introductions. Now it was time for mine. And I hadn't even started yet. The morning after the dinner, I woke early. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a place that had just hosted a dozen guests drinking overpriced Merlot and pretending I didn't exist. I made coffee just the way Mom liked it. Vanilla creamer, a pinch of nutmeg. I poured 2 mugs and walked into the kitchen where she sat, scrolling my mug in front of her, and sat down, cradling mine like it might warm more than my hand. She didn't say thank you, just glanced up briefly, then back to her screen. I waited a few seconds, then said softly, "How long do you plan on pretending this is normal?" She looked up finally, and her mouth tightened. "Lila, can we not start the day with tension?" "I'm not looking for a fight," I said. "I'm asking why it's okay that your daughter sleeps in a garage while strangers toast to you inside her house." She exhaled stably. "Jasper is doing so much for this family. He's trying to stabilize everything. The least you can do is not stir up trouble." I blinked at her, not sure if I was more shocked by her words or the calm with which she said them. "I gave you everything, Mom." She sipped her coffee, eyes fixed on the sink behind me. "Then be gracious about it." That silence after her words, it didn't even ache anymore. It was the silence of clarity. Around midday, I offered to run to the grocery store. I needed out of that house. I needed to breathe. I needed to scream somewhere where no one would hear me. When I returned, 3 bags in each arm, I heard my name before I even opened the front door fully. I paused. The office door, just slightly ajar. Inside, Jasper's finalized, "The property will be legally under the Voss name. The original owner won't be able to contest," a man replied through a tiny speaker. Must have been a lawyer on Zoom. "The paperwork will be submitted by end of next week," the voice continued. "After that, even if she protests, the title will be sealed." My hand gripped the doorknob so tightly the plastic bag handles cut into my wrist. "You told me she gave it up," Jasper said. Mom's voice followed, quiet. "She did. She just doesn't realize what that means yet." My breath caught. I stepped back, set the groceries down quietly by the door, and walked toward the garage. That evening, just after the sun dipped behind the trees, I found her alone in the living room, folding towels like nothing had shifted, like our whole foundation hadn't cracked in half. I sat across from her on the couch. "Are you giving him the house?" She didn't look up. "You're overreacting." "Don't do that," I said. "Don't pretend this is about drama. It's about trust. About respect." She stopped. "Please don't embarrass us." I waited, heart in my throat. "Just sleep in the garage a bit longer." I didn't reply. I stood, walked out the front door, stood on the porch until the night air burned through my coat. Back inside the garage, I didn't bother turning on the lamp. I sat on the cement floor, my back against the wall. There were no tears left, just a pen and the old notebook I kept in my suitcase. I opened to a blank page, and I began to write, because even the coldest night has a morning. I woke up with my coat still on, the scratchy blanket tangled around my legs, and the garage still just as cold as when I fell asleep. But something felt different. Not warmer, exactly, just sharper, like I'd shed a layer of doubt overnight and uncovered something harder underneath. With a small stretch, I reached into the filing box I'd dragged from the corner last night. Years ago, I'd labeled everything like a good daughter: mortgage, repairs, insurance, and under the tab-marked title, I found it. The original deed, signed, notarized, and still mine. I grabbed my phone and called the Chittenden County Title Office. A calm voice answered after a few rings. "Yes, ma'am," the clerk confirmed. "That property is still under your name. We haven't received any transfer filings in the last 4 years." I didn't smile. I didn't react. I just said thank you and ended the call. A quiet calm came over me. Not relief, not victory, just readiness. That afternoon, I took a walk to clear my head. I passed the post office, the bakery that still sold maple scones like they did when I was in high school, the bench where Dad used to wait for me after art lessons. That was a lifetime ago. Before Jasper, before Tenant, before silence. As I neared the corner of Pine and Elm, my phone buzzed. A text from Clara, my old coworker. "Why didn't you come to the Voss family dinner last night? Jasper said you moved to Burlington." I stopped walking. I never left. Hands trembling, I opened social media. There it was. Picture after picture, a string of carefully staged shots, my mom in her favorite green shawls, Jasper at the head of the table, even the family dog perched beside the fireplace. Not one image of me, not one mention. Burlington, they hadn't just erased me from the house, they'd erased me from the narrative. I stared at the screen until my thumb hurt from gripping the phone too tight. Then I turned around and walked straight home, back to the garage. Inside, I didn't sit. I didn't stew. I opened my laptop, pulled up the contact list, and called the family lawyer, Mr. Carver, the one who handled my father's estate all those years ago. When he answered, I didn't waste time. "I need you to issue a cease and desist. Any attempts to alter property ownership, make structural changes, or present false claims about residency, shut it down. Full legal weight." He was silent for a beat, then understood. "I didn't tell Mom. I didn't tell Jasper. I let the letter do that for me." By evening, I was back in the garage, organizing everything, emails, bank statements, the deed. I stacked them neatly in a box, labeled it bona fide evidence, and slid it beside my cot like armor beside a soldier. I stared at it for a long time, then opened my notebook, turned to a clean page, and wrote, "Hi, Mr. Carver. I believe you handle real estate dispute cases." Because now it wasn't just about surviving their betrayal, it was about rewriting the story they tried to delete me from. And then my stepfather found the letter I never meant him to see. It must have slipped from the old notebook I'd tucked between the blankets. I hadn't even noticed it was gone until I heard the garage door slam open with a violence that made the metal rattle. Jasper stood there, red-faced, the folded page crumpled in his fist. "You left this lying around. Thought you were clever hiding it under the mattress?" he barked. My breath caught. That letter wasn't meant for anyone but me. It was a spill of pain, written in the kind of rawness I never let surface around them. I'd poured out the grief of being replaced in my own home, the ache of my mother's silence, the rage I'd swallowed too long. He held it up, shaking. "So this is what you really think of us." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just met his eyes and said, "Did I lie?" His jaw clenched. "You ungrateful? After all we've done for you?" Footsteps pounded down the hallway. My mother appeared at the entrance, her robe clutched at her chest, eyes wide and furious. "What is going on?" "She wrote this trash," Jasper shouted, waving the page. "Said we manipulated her, used her, said we treated her like trash in her own home." Mom's eyes shifted from him to me. "Tell me that's not true," she whispered. I didn't answer. "You think we owe you just because you gave us a roof?" she snapped. "We've done nothing but try to include you. You're the one who acts like some kind of martyr." I didn't argue. I walked past them both into the house. For the first time in months, I stepped into my own kitchen. The warmth, the smell of lavender oil, the hum of the refrigerator. It should have felt familiar. It didn't. I opened the cabinet, pulled out the file folder, and calmly removed the deed copy I had printed and sealed. I turned, held it up. "This isn't your house to yell in," I said. Jasper's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I walked right past them and went back to the garage without another word. By midday, I was still focused until my phone lit up with a notification. Selena, my childhood friend. We hadn't talked in weeks, but we followed each other on Instagram, occasionally exchanged holiday texts. She'd posted a video. I clicked. Her voice came through the screen, soft at first, then stronger. "You all remember the Voss family? I grew up with their youngest daughter. I haven't spoken up until now, but you need to know what happened." I froze. She went on, every detail. How I gave the house to help my mom, how I ended up sleeping in a cold garage while strangers dined in my living room, how I was erased from invitations, denied dignity, stripped of everything except my breath. She wouldn't say this herself, Helena added, but I will. By noon, the video had crossed 1.5 million views. By evening, it hit 3. The comments were relentless. They used her. That house is hers, period. How do you treat your daughter like a squatter? Mom or not, silence is betrayal. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just stared at the screen and let the weight of those strangers' voices hold me in place, like the world had finally turned around and pointed back to the truth. For once, I wasn't shouting alone. And right when the truth went public, he tried one last thing to ruin me. I was sipping lukewarm coffee at the corner booth of a quiet diner on Shelburne Road, trying to draft a timeline for my next legal step, when a man in uniform walked in and asked for me by name. The table grew silent around me as he approached and handed over an envelope. "Ma'am, you've been served." Inside was a petition. Jasper had filed a request for a temporary protective order, claiming I was mentally unstable, a danger to myself and others. Attached was a single paragraph ripped straight from the letter he'd stolen from my notebook. No context, no explanation, just one raw excerpt from a private grief journal, weaponized like a blade. "He's trying to paint me as unstable," I muttered, heart pounding, but hands steady. After everything he's done, I didn't drive straight home. I turned toward a small brick office near the community college, my therapist's office. Dr. Ellis greeted me with her usual warmth, a quiet nod, and ushered me into the back room. She'd known everything, weeks of sessions, painstakingly built. She read the petition, then looked up at me. "You've come here weekly," she said calmly. "You've never once shown signs of instability. What he's doing is manipulative, and it ends now." She typed a formal evaluation, included every session date, notes on progress, and her clinical opinion in black and white. That night, I emailed it to my attorney. Also, I wrote, "Please draft an eviction notice for both Jasper Voss and Nora Voss." By morning, everything was signed, filed, in motion. 3 days passed quietly. Jasper must have thought his petition would stall me, shame me into silence. He didn't know silence was my sharpest tool. It was Thursday afternoon when the sheriff's cruiser pulled up outside the house. I heard the tires on gravel before I saw the red lights wash across the garage wall. From my perch on the old folding chair, I stood and walked to the edge of the driveway, watching as the deputy approached the front door, clipboard in hand, calm and unshakable. Jasper opened it with that usual puffed-up stance until his eyes landed on the badge. "I'm here to deliver a court order," the deputy said evenly. "You and any other non-templing holding occupants have 72 hours to vacate the premises. This property is registered under Lila Voss. Any refusal to comply will result in legal removal." Jasper blinked like someone waking from a long, self-serving dream. "She's lying. This house belongs to us." The deputy didn't even glance at me. He handed Jasper the paperwork. I stood behind the screen door. Not smug at all. Just rooted. For once, he had no audience, just law. And he wasn't used to law being on my side. His voice cracked. "You don't get to do this." I looked him in the eye and answered, calm as the breeze rustling the maple leaves behind me. "I already did." He stepped back like he didn't recognize the world anymore. Like daughters weren't supposed to fight. Like garage walls weren't supposed to talk back. But I wasn't just the girl in the garage anymore. I was the woman on the deed. But even after the sheriff left, my mother still hadn't said a word to me until that morning. It was Saturday, gray and slow. The kind of morning where the air felt like it was holding its breath. I'd just finished folding the last of the laundry I didn't remember starting when I heard it. A knock. Not frantic, not proud, just hesitant. I opened the front door. There she stood, no suitcase, no jewelry, not even her usual polished posture. Her coat was misbuttoned, her eyes rimmed red, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't look like a woman with a plan. "He left," she said, voice thin. "Took the savings, took the car. I didn't know. I didn't think." Her sentence hung unfinished between us, like all the others she'd never completed. I didn't say a word. I stepped back, led her into the entryway, but nothing beyond that. She walked in slowly, glancing at the living room like it had changed languages. She stood in the kitchen, quiet, then almost in a whisper, "Can I stay here for a while?" My hand, mid-stirring honey into my tea, froze. The spoon clinked softly against the side of the mug. "I gave you this home once," I said. "You gave me a garage." She turned her head slightly, not fully, not enough to meet my eyes. This house doesn't have room for what you brought into it, I continued calmly. But I'll pay for a motel. That's more than either of you did for me. I could see her shoulders drop just slightly, as if bracing for more. I had no monologue to give her. No screaming match, no tears, just boundaries. Her lips parted, maybe to protest, but she stopped herself. She just nodded. I handed her the motel voucher I'd printed that morning. A part of me had known this moment might come. We stood at the door again, but this time I walked her out. She paused on the porch, fingers fumbling with the collar of her coat. I thought I was protecting myself, she said. I didn't challenge it. I didn't need to. Sometimes protection looks a lot like betrayal, I answered gently. And you'll have to live with that. Not me. She turned, walked down the steps, and didn't look back. Inside, I sat on the couch, the one that used to hold 5 bodies and carry none of their weight. I traced the rim of my tea mug with a fingertip. The deed still lay on the coffee table, edges slightly curled, my name on it, plain and solid. Only mine. No applause. No applause was ever coming. Just quiet. Just peace. And that was enough. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and whispered to no one in particular, next time, I save a key for the version of me you should have loved. Readers resonate with Lila's reclaiming of her home from Jasper and her mother's betrayal, sharing stories of fighting for their own worth after being sidelined. Her journey inspires those pushed aside to hold their ground. Have you ever had to redraw boundaries with those who undervalued you? Share your story below.